So I think I've watched three things this week. First of all, I watched all of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood Part 3, and it continues to be good and interesting. And I've had a lot of time to think about it and try and think about why Brotherhood and the original Fullmetal Alchemist feel so different. And I think the idea is that since the first one wouldn't have all the source material, they basically decided to structure the first one around the concept of sin and redemption, where basically characters, kept doing immoral things and they had to live with the consequences and kind of come to an acceptance themselves. That could probably explain a lot of why the first one had so much mood to it, because a lot of those parts where people mess up need to be covered more in depth. Whereas with Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, you've got an entire bigger world and more complex characters to deal with. They basically they don't sin and then realize they have to do something to fix that. It's just the universe keeps expanding because Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood has access to the entire concept within the author's head of the Fullmetal Alchemist universe. Um, Beyond that, I don't want to spoil too much, since if you haven't seen it, I really want you to see it. But if you watch the original Fullmetal Alchemist and you felt like 13 episodes in the Brotherhood, or 13 or less episodes in the Brotherhood, it wasn't seeming all that spectacular, that's because since it's about a bigger world, it doesn't really need to focus so much on those key important aspects, making us feel that these people need to redeem themselves in some way. A very good example is with the history of Ed and Al and their attempted transmutation of their mother, which of course is not spoiler because that's in the very first episode of both series, or it's in the very first storyline of both. It's the entire premise behind it. I definitely think that the way it was portrayed in the original Fullmetal Alchemist was definitely better, and it makes more sense because that thing is their sin. That what they did there is what they have to deal with. Whereas in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, that was pretty much a start of an adventure. So while it was traumatic in its own respects, that basically meant that the anime didn't have to trump it up in any way. Brotherhood did not have to trump it up. So that also gave it permission to just kind of move through it at a natural, slow, or not. I mean, if you use the original one, there's a difference between rushed and the way the original one does. There's something in between where it's like it just goes at its own pace and feels like a reasonable pace, and it doesn't need the atmosphere because we're not supposed to focus on that this time. And a lot of what it does focus on instead just ends up being a lot more awesome and cool. And I wish I could give examples, but in this simple anime analysis, I don't want to do that. I'd have to do something dedicated to reviewing the spoilers behind it. And every time I try and record something like that, something else keeps coming up and I keep not doing it. Oh well. Anyways, another thing I watched was all of Nyan Koi, or at least all. Oh wait, no, there was only the one season, which was unfortunate because it didn't really end in a place where it really ended anything. It just kind of set itself back to a stable state, so to speak. The basic idea is that our main character accidentally breaks a cat statue, essentially, and he gets cursed, and because of that curse, he can now understand and talk to cats. And the problem is, he's allergic to cats. His family's a bunch of dipshits, or rather his mother and his sister, because his dad's not around. But his mother and his sister, they're like, we love cats. We'll even have cats at the breakfast table. Oh, you're not going to eat breakfast with us because of the cat at the breakfast table? We'll feed your breakfast to the I don't know. It's silly, so I guess they can kind of get away with it. But anyway, the problem is if the cat curse progresses too far, then he turns into a cat. Overall, it's definitely supposed to be a harem anime, and definitely one of those harem animes where our main character has a very clear preference from the start, from the get-go, and it's all about kind of almost maybe, but never quite making it to having a relationship with that person, and it pretty much ends on that same note, unfortunately. So, if you want an anime with a romance aspect that actually goes somewhere, obviously Nyan Koi is not the way to go. But I thought the way it set up the harem, the characters within the harem itself, they were very interesting. You know how I talk about different harem anime feeling like they're trying to do something kind of different. They're trying to explore concepts that maybe people hadn't done before. Now, I don't think that means these character archetypes have not shown up in other places, but something about it feels like a genuine attempt to do that. Finally, I'm watching the original Mobile Suit Gundam. Some of you were asking why I got these DVDs. Bandai announced they were going to release one with the original Japanese subtitle or the original Japanese dub or whatnot. The answer is that first of all, I never heard about that because I don't pay that much attention. Basically, I only have a DVD radar. So maybe if it had been coming out on DVD, my mind would change, but probably not because I still have this incredible desire to watch the original Mobile Suit Gundam, to understand where all of this Gundam stuff come from. And 14 episodes into it, I'm pretty glad I have so far because, well, it's a lot like Gundam Seed, or rather, I think Gundam Seed was designed to be a lot like it. There's definitely differences in the sets up, the characters, the relationship dynamics between, like, you know, like in Gundam Seed, our main character has a friend that he has to constantly fight on the other side. This one does not seem to have that set up. But otherwise, it's quite amazing how much of the original Gundam concepts are present and executed very Gundam-like in this very first one. So, anybody who likes a Gundam, the Gundam, any subtle ideas of the Gundam, the way the series portray themselves, I could really understand why a series like this would be a great big awesome thing for people then. Now, of course, I'm watching it after having watched a bunch of other Gundam stuff, and so I'm remembering that, and it's not going to wow me and be on my top at least 14 episodes in. Maybe it does something really interesting later, I don't know, but otherwise, that's a pretty interesting watch. Episode 14 is a good place for me to stop because it gives me a chance to consider whether or not to try and download and watch the original Japanese episode 15 or something. Because there's 42 episodes in the DVD release, but there were 43 in the original. Apparently, the original Japanese episode 15 was requested specifically by the director to not be dubbed, I guess. Something about him being embarrassed with it. And I don't know if there's necessarily anything that wrong with it from what I've heard of people's opinions about it, but I don't even know what it's about, so part of me wants to just dig it out, watch it anyways. Hopefully, if the upcoming Mobile Suit Gundam box set or release that I heard about, if that has the original Japanese dub, hopefully that one also that one includes episode 15 in some way. Otherwise, I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna watch specifically after Mobile Suit Gundam, but I highly suspect it'll probably be something new that I picked up.